I got all I want, and I got all I need, and I got everything. I got you and me. All I want, I got all I need.
Marriage is the best. Hey, welcome back. So today we're going to be talking about marriage and influence. This primarily comes from Gottman and his fourth principle of allowing your partner to influence you. Allowing your partner to influence you. I run into a lot of marriages that are struggling to manage and to maintain influence in their relationships. Sometimes that sounds like, I don't want to be controlled, or, I don't want to give up important parts of myself, or I don't want to feel like I'm less than in the marriage. And so the influence travels less smoothly between each partner. And control is a surefire way to hurt your marriage. It really doesn't play any part in a healthy relationship, whether that be like a parenting, a mother, father, sister, brother, coworker. Control, management style. Control is just an ineffective relational strategy, and it wounds marriages. Makes it really difficult for a marriage to survive. So ultimately, instead of control, you can create a marriage that is full of influence, both the give and the take. It really is the way to go. Influence is a sort of stance toward your partner that says, I am open to hearing what you have to say. Or it can sound like, I'm going to take how you feel into consideration. Or I'm going to allow you to influence me, my behaviors, my attitudes, and my decision-making. This becomes easier when you're giving your partner the benefit of the doubt, and when you know that they have your best interest at heart. Think of the mindset that you may enter into when addressing a recent conflict with your spouse. The stance you approach that conflict with dictates the results. For example, if Becca tells me that she is overwhelmed by the housework, taking care of the kids, that she needs my help, my stance, or whether or not I'm open to her influence, it'll greatly impact the way that we move through that conflict. So if I'm closed off to Becca, I may become kind of defensive and tell her all the things that I recently, or maybe not that recently, did to the house. Maybe I happened to do the dishes or help with some laundry, or, I swept, or, there's millions and millions of things, and they never stop. And so I could just give her a list of all the things that I have been doing. I could tell her how tired I am, and that I've seen, 38 clients for the last 3 weeks in a row, and that I'm doing the best that I can. I may say that my role is to go out and slay the dragon, and her role is to take care of things at the home. And so, maybe she can't expect me to jump in here or there with whatever she's saying. But, it's possible, very possible, that I may have said one or two, or maybe even three of those things at some point or another. And however reasonable those things sound to you, the reality is I would definitely be hurting our connection and missing an opportunity to build up our relationship. So switching stances to a more open and more easily influenced stance, I might say something like, all right, I hear that you are tired and overwhelmed and you probably need some help. And that simple response is a response of, I hear you, I see you. I'm willing to engage in this thing. So with this stance, I'm no longer, headed down the road toward being disconnected and her feeling hurt and unseen. And instead, I'm opening the door to increase our intimacy and connection. Just with a simple, I hear you. You're overwhelmed, you're tired, and you probably need my help. And I notice in that phrase, it's really all about where she is at and very little to do with where I'm at. If she's expressing a need, that she needs help with kids around the house, then she's really not talking about where I'm at in that moment, and bringing that in, tends to just create an air of defensiveness and shuts things down. At the office, I've seen influence be very much shut down, oftentimes underneath years of unresolved conflicts, or where kind of bitterness and resentment have grown up and shut down that influential part. There's almost a part of me that has to remain open to Becca in order for me to allow her to influence me, like an internal part. And I'm not even sure what it is, but I know when I'm closed off. I know when I've kind of closed that door and I don't want to be influenced and I don't want to let anything in. Oftentimes that comes from, a place of struggle, whether I'm hungry or tired or frustrated or stressed, or I just had a really long week. That part of me, I can just kind of feel it now, because I'm so aware of it. And when it's open, sometimes I have to force it open. So I'll have to go into that deep part of me to say, it is better for me to remain open to Becca's influence, to her thoughts and her feelings and where she's at, than it is for me to remain closed. So if you could find that part of you, right, that deep down inside part that looks out to your partner in a moment of stress or need and is either closed or open, that identification will probably help you in your exploration of this kind of concept. It'll probably really help in managing the future kind of moments where you're going to want to let influence in. But in some cases and in some instances, couples kind of shut that door, and they don't allow each other to speak into each other's lives, right? There isn't an openness, there isn't a consideration, there isn't a connection that they are kind of willing to engage with each other in. And therefore they struggle to hear one another, they struggle to understand one another, they struggle to focus on what the other party is bringing in, and tone down or turn down what they want to represent in those moments or conversations or conflicts. And honestly, there's a level of maturity and humility that must accompany kind of this marital dynamic. You kind of have to tone yourself down a little bit. Your needs, what you want to be fulfilled, what you are thinking or feeling like you're missing. You kind of have to tone a lot of that down in order to hear what your partner is really saying. Like the example I gave before, if I made that moment where she was expressing exhaustion, fatigue, and a cry for help, if I would have made that about me, I would have thought about all of the reasons I'm tired and all the reasons I'm stressed and all the things that I've been doing, rather than really seeing her and where she was coming. Not that I don't have things that I'm going to need to share with her as well, and that I don't have limits myself. So when I'm sitting with a closed off couple, a couple where that part deep inside of them has shut, or is mostly shut, there's almost a sense of hopelessness or dread in the session. I think that comes from this immovability factor. I talked a little bit about this when we were doing the bitterness and the resentment, and how that kind of closes us off to influence. I probably said those words in that same episode. But when I'm sitting with a couple where the influence part has closed and they're not getting through to one another, there's really very little that anyone can do or say because no one is being influenced, right? Like everybody's closed off. Everybody's shut, if you will, in their spirits. I don't know. I don't know where it is, honestly. And so when you're shut and when you're sitting with someone that's shut, especially when you're sitting with a couple and they're kind of closed off to one another, man, it's a kind of a potent thing, like you really feel it in the room. It's one of those therapeutic dynamics that is pretty unique to I think the therapeutic kind of environment. But when influence flows well from one side of the marriage to the other, it can be an absolutely beautiful thing, like equally as beautiful as the other is hopeless. It almost feels like an incredible tennis match where each volley is like incredibly exciting, and they're playing and moving in sync, the equal and opposite movement, and the strokes are just finessed, and sitting with a couple who's open toward one another, it's exciting. There's excitement, there's energy. Yeah. When there's a closed off influence, it kind of sucks the air out of the room. It kind of sucks the energy out of the room. But when you're open to your partner, when that stance is open, when that part of you that is the influence part or influenced, the influential, whatever that stinking part is, when it's open, it's incredibly exciting to sit with. And there's this like volley that goes on between the couple. And then every once in a while, I'll throw in another shot, in there, and we'll play this game, and it's really beautiful and really fun and really exciting because everybody's playing and everybody is in sync, and we're all kind of hearing and understanding and seeking to hear and understand each other and open to hearing what needs to be heard in order for the system to kind of continue to grow and improve. Sometimes I've likened this to like a flow state, like I don't even know where that comes from, but it's this kind of high level, bizarre. I've actually heard a couple other counselors describe it as well. But it's just an incredible thing when you're sitting with someone and that influence is open. Honestly, it doesn't just happen in marriage counseling either. Like there's a state of influence when the therapeutic relationship has built to a point when you're speaking to one another and it's flowing so freely and so openly that there's this exhilaration and everything else fades away, and it's just this conversation that's aimed at continued health and growth. It's really, really fun. It's a very unique experience. So part of that is like openness, a willingness, and then an authentic engagement. So when you're open, that part of you is open, when you're willing to engage, and then when you're also like kind of bringing your most authentic version of you, right? You're not hiding, you're not kind of sheltering your words, and you're not like avoiding, you're not avoiding conflict. You're willing to engage, you're open to, showing yourself, to moving through the process. And when people are open and willing and engaged and authentic, it just creates this incredible flow that is really fun and exciting. So let's say that your part is closed off to your partner. Let's say that the influence part has been closed for a while, and you're really struggling to hear from them. You guys are getting in conflict regularly, maybe every time you speak. You've started to avoid one another. You've started to maybe sleep in other rooms. You've stopped doing things that you would otherwise have done that were loving or giving. You can feel yourself turning away from them, whether it be when they're, bidding for a conversation or bidding for humor. Maybe you're ignoring a phone call or not responding to their text messages because it's too stressful or too painful or too wounded. So, those would be some symptoms that your influence system is closed and that it needs to be reopened. So how does one reopen a closed influence in a marriage, a closed off influence system, I think first and foremost, I think we need to talk about it. I know. Talking about it, it's not the most fun thing that we're going to do, but we need to communicate where the system is. So using the language that you get from the podcast, sharing the podcast, listening to it together, reading chapter 4 of the Gottman book. That would be maybe it's not chapter 4, but reading principle 4 about influence. Remember how you originally felt about your partner. Sometimes that can be helpful to just think back on those early years when your influence is healthy and well and you were open to them. Remembering that season can help you to reopen some of the influence system that's been shut down. Even just talking about some of those original feelings, original experiences, original dates, whatever made you kind of fall in love back then. You're going to want to identify the wound or issue coming in the way of the influence. So whether you do that with your partner or with a counselor or with a good friend who's also very much pro your marriage, preferably it should be of the same gender. But anyway, so reaching out to somebody who is very much pro you, pro your reaching out to your mentor, just like we talked about last week, and identifying those wounds. There might be something coming in the way of you opening that door, opening that part of you that can be influenced. That part of you creating the break in the connection. Looking back on my own marriage, I can definitely see lots of seasons where my influence part of me was fairly closed. And a lot of this happened when I was incredibly immature and stressed, and we were just kind of going through the ringer. So those first 3 or 4 years of marriage where we're just trying to figure it out. We're very broken. We're broken in so many different ways. And, I remember Becca saying, hey, we're doing too much with regards to going out and maybe seeing family or doing too much for the holidays. And her kind of requesting that we gauge things back. And I wasn't able to hear. It just flew by me. And I just was thinking, we can make it work. 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 And if we can make it work, we should make it work. So I wasn't really open to hearing that she felt like we were doing too much. There was some times where she would express a limit, some sort of limit of time or energy. She would express a fatigue or a stress, and it would just, again, fly by me. I wouldn't resonate to it. I wouldn't connect with it. I wasn't open to it. And also, there was an immaturity there. I was incredibly immature and trying to do this thing well, the marriage thing well, and thinking I was probably doing it pretty well, knowing me, and still not doing it that great because I hadn't grown in our connection enough to know that I was missing a bunch of these things. And some of that, I think, is actually a symptom of an early marriage or an early season of marriage where those immature lenses of each other and are kind of negatively impact our ability to hear each other. There was some medical stuff that we went through that I didn't really understand or hear her on, and definitely did not influence me. And that was really hurtful and painful for her. We had to kind of work on that moving forward, or, continue to work on that moving after it happened. And so one thing that I did that, obviously this is not a good thing. Again, this is kind of a closed off influence system, which is when she was sick, and then I would leave to go to work because, in some ways it was just because we needed money and I was stressed and anxious about money. But it was a long time into our marriage before I would just set aside work to be present with Becca and to allow her sickness to influence the way that I worked. And, to just like be okay with a little bit of a loss of income for a healthy, happy, connected spouse. And when we talk about sustainable systems, right, when we talk about investing and prioritizing and engaging in your marriage, we're talking about like allowing those parts to be influenced, right? Like how sustainable is not ever giving up some work for a sick partner? I don't know. I think that very well could create some bitterness and some resentment and some hardship in a marriage. So yeah, that's definitely, so those are some ways that I have failed. I'm sure that you can think of ways that you have failed in being closed off to the influence of your partner. And I'm sure that you could see how maybe that has negatively impacted your connection and your relationship. So yeah, there you go. You could talk about that with them. Some things I'm doing really well recently is we recently did an episode on mental load. It actually was a really great episode, and I think it turned out really well. It was due to a couple of weeks of fighting that we were able to put that together. So good on us. But eventually, we were speaking the same language. Eventually, I began to hear her, and eventually, I really did begin to open my eyes to the things around the house that she was seeing and that really needed to be taken into consideration. If you haven't heard that episode yet, we talked about being aware of your partner's mental load, how real it is, how heavy it can be, to expand your awareness in practice, right? Like you're aware of theirs, and now you're supposed to expand your awareness. So expand and see the different things. So I've been working on that. I've been working my awareness, my expansion, and then I've been acting. So just that's step 3, aware, expand, act. So I just start taking little steps, little by little. So in that process, I think that my influence meter and my ability to be influenced, my openness, that influence part is much more open to Rebecca more recently, which has been super fun and super healthy and super good. Yeah, picking things up, cooking, parenting. This is actually a really big one. So one thing that Becca and I have done really well is we allow each other to influence our parenting. So I'll call her out for a parenting dynamic, never in front of the children, but I will call her out. I'll say, hey, when you were discussing that with number 3, you came off a little bit harsh. And I think that she would really appreciate it if you were to just address that with her. Because I want them to have this, beautiful, wonderful relationship moving forward. And she has done that many, many times with me. Hey, number 2 was, I think, probably feeling pretty misunderstood because you kind of missed some things here, and I think that you were really frustrated, and so it was really difficult for you to engage with them on that. So we allow each other to influence our parenting. We're open in that, and it makes us both better. It makes our relationships with our children better. Not that those are perfect, or that it's easy in any way, shape, or form. Today was a very, very difficult day. So yeah, those are some examples of positive kind of open influence taking. And things that I'm kind of working on currently in the influence category is I'm really bad at planning dates. So I would like to get on kind of continuing to work on that, and maybe just taking on a little bit more of the share of that. I know that adds to her mental load. So I think that would be really good. Again, this is something that I've self-identified as something that I'm very, very much not good at, but that would be a good thing. Like continuing to think through food for the household. That's been a big stressful thing that we've been processing through. Probably one of our biggest stresses of 2025 is just feeding our children and feeding them healthy things. Oh, that reminds me of another thing that I didn't take influence on for a really long time. Oh, man. Anyways, there's lots of those. We could talk through lots of those. So find that part inside of you that is the influence part. The part that can receive the influence or is either closed down. And do some soul searching. How open are you How eager and willing are you to connect? Is there anything in the way of you opening yourself up to their influence? Are there hurts or wounds or negative things that have created some bitterness, that have kind of glued that door shut? And beginning to pry that back open, beginning to identify where the bitterness lies, beginning to, address some of the things that need to be addressed in order for you to reopen that influence system. Now, one thing that I'm, obviously there's a big caveat here where all abusive relationships do not apply. Abusive relationships cannot apply healthy marriage dynamics in their relationship because there's active harm being done. So if you are in an abusive relationship, or if you suspect that there's some harm being done, maybe go listen to our second episode, maybe look on some resources. We have the domestic violence hotline in our show notes. So if you want to check that out, maybe make a call, maybe just see. Because if you start to try and allow lots of influence from an abusive partner, it usually just turns into power and control dynamics. And that can be really destructive and unsafe for you. So that's just something to keep into consideration, is that every positive, healthy marriage dynamic, it doesn't apply to abuse situations because of that element of this person does not have your best interest at heart and mind, and there is active harm and all of those things. So it's just another thing to keep in mind. But once you find that part, and you find the state of it, and you do some assessment of where you're at, then I would really encourage you to start to work toward opening up influence in your life. Hearing your partner a little bit more, turning toward them more often, shutting off the distractions, spending 20 minutes day to day just talking through life and stress, and really listening to those things and allowing those things to influence you. Like if your partner says, make some random comment about something that would be really nice for them, maybe make that happen. Maybe that could be part of your positive influence where you go and make that happen. But really just open yourself up to that. Listen to them and be open and considerate of things that they might need. Now, I usually put this at the front, and I'm not convinced I won't still put this at the front. But you've come this far, and I was just remembering, because I was looking up some statistics surrounding influence, and one thing that kind of was shocking was that when you look at the numbers, which are fun, husbands that don't share power or influence in their relationship with their spouses have like an 81% fail rate. In preparation for this podcast, I was listening to one of Gottman's really short YouTube videos, and in that, he said that the most important thing that any marriage can do on the male side is to open up influence from their partner. And that one of the most important things that a woman can do on the female side is men really like it when they aren't blamed for everything. So that basically men like it when the responsibility is shared. And so one thing that you can practice as a lady is to share the responsibility for whatever is going wrong and make sure that you're taking ownership of your part. And that will really bless your partner. And men, open up that influence part, take a whack at it, and I hope that it serves you well. Thank you so much for listening to our episode today. We hope it blesses you. We hope that you're finding everything through Marriage is the Best that is encouraging and is uplifting. It's, and if you are experiencing that, we're super grateful. Let us know by smashing the thing with the stars that are when there's a bunch of them, like smash all the stars, I guess. And that sounds terrible. Smash all the stars. But yeah, if you wouldn't mind doing that, that will make it easier for other people to listen and benefit from the podcast. And thank you if you've already done that. We appreciate all of you, and we hope that your marriage is the best this week. Bye, everybody.
I got all I need, and I got everything. I got you and me. All I want, I got all I need.
Man, I think I wrote these things down in too many different spaces. I don't even know if I want that in there. Yeah. So off. Here we go. Marriage is the best. Marriage is the best.